what is the labyrinth?
So I like to think of the labyrinth as an archetypal pattern, and I've found an explanation for an archetypal pattern, which I think really fits the labyrinth. So it's a physical pattern that brings order to chaos. So quite like that explanation. It's like a maze, but we have one entrance in and one entrance out. So it's a walk that resembles a maze. Most people confuse it with the maze.
So when I first walked into your shop and I saw the poster that said Labyrinth, I was drawn to it because it's my favourite film. So my favourite film was The Labyrinth with David Bowie in the 80s. And there is, she has to solve the labyrinth. It is something that she solves, isn't it? That's what happens in the film. So what and you're talking about walking a labyrinth. What does that mean, to walk a labyrinth?
So it's interesting because the film is probably a maze, and it's probably being used in modern parlance. I think the labyrinth is like a very complicated maze. And the more you study it, the more you could actually argue the labyrinth is a maze. However, trying to think of it as a meditative tool or well-being or therapeutic, I find it much more helpful to make the very clear distinction that it is a symbol that is not a maze. And it's a walk. You walk through. You don't need to solve it so much as you might have in the film. It's more just a walk, and you follow the path, so you can't go wrong because the path has no dead ends. It leads you from the beginning along the walk to the centre, and then in the centre you can look back on the walk that you've made into the centre. And the walks that I lead and others who are labyrinth facilitators would lead it's kind of just a reflection on almost anything you like, but very often it becomes a reflection on your life. And I think something to do with the way the labyrinth twists and turns unexpectedly, it causes you to think differently. It helps somehow, I think, to change your perspective. So you might start a labyrinth walk with a particular issue that's really bugging you. And for the first 5 minutes of the walk, that issue is playing on your mind. But then the path changes direction 180 degrees. And that seems to physically change your perspective, and it helps you look at the issue in a different light. And then it takes your mind away very often into the issue can become subconscious. And by the time you get to the centre, it might pop back in your mind, but as a solution.
So this is very similar to mindfulness then?
I actually introduced it to the mental health hospitals when I was working down south as a tool to kind of enable people into mindfulness, because I find people who'd got severe anxiety and concentration issues, and especially when they're highly medicated, and to try and meditate is quite difficult. Whereas most of us can actually walk, and most of us can just put one foot in front of the other and keep walking. And your mind seems to disconnect for most of us without trying. So it might take 5 or 10 minutes, but people found after a while, your mind disconnects, which is the goal of meditation. So I found that to me, it's a way into meditation for people who struggle with it.
So if someone was going to come along to one of your sessions and they were going to walk the labyrinth, what would be the first thing they saw? What would it appear like?
So that I tend to make my own labyrinths. So I follow the chartreuse tile pattern and the classical pattern, and I'm hoping to do 2 on this walk on this 15th in Kendal. And I'm going to put this is the goal at the minute, to put a classical one in the garden, and I'm going to be using flowers and leaves and things like that. So what you'll see on the grass is just, it looks quite artistic and creative and pretty, a pattern made out of flowers. And then inside I've got shells and crystals and objects that I've collected in nature, and you'll see a pattern, and then there might be candles as well. So you will see a pretty pattern really.
So it's like a path that's made
Yeah.
out of all of these.
It'll take up, the whole room, kind of it. The whole room will be filled of this little maze-like pattern.
You're doing this indoors or outdoors?
Both, yeah, indoors and then outdoors.
Oh, wow. And so someone would come along to the entrance and it would be really clear, would it, where they would walk?
So I will facilitate that and introduce people. So I don't know how many people, but as a general rule, we kind of like to space people out so you're not walking in a queue. So generally, people will come. I'll stand at the entrance probably. I usually have done this, standing at the entrance and then sort of just gently put my hand on their back when it's time for them to set off, so that spaces it out. And other times I just let it flow and allow people to, once they've done it once, then they know where the entrance is and they can set off themselves. It's reasonably obvious, but sometimes it's not 100. I don't have a great big arrow saying start here, so.
But it's the twists and turns that might take people by surprise.
I think so, yeah. As you see people standing at the start of the Labyrinth walk, looking at it, trying to work it out, literally physically trying to work out the pattern. And I think, yeah, you'll not work it out like that.
So the other thing that I think of, if I'm not thinking of David Bowie, then I'm probably thinking of the Minotaur or something like that when I'm thinking of a Labyrinth. Is there a connection there, or am I getting mixed?
Yeah. I think the most common connection in today's thesis on the Minotaur, and I like that idea. That's why a lot of people talk about the Labyrinth as peaceful, calm, quiet, like mindfulness. But the Minotaur is, I mean, I like to think of that as, it was the Minotaur bad? That's another discussion, isn't it? But you could actually talk about walking the labyrinth as a wrestle with yourself and your inner demons. And sometimes it can actually be physically almost like that, where you actually come into terms with the part of yourself that is your Minotaur or your inner demon, and the whole symbolism of the labyrinth and the Minotaur is conquering that, which I also like. Maybe I don't like conquering it, but coming to terms and accepting. For me, that's one of the things the labyrinth has done. It has shown me that the dark and the light, the shade, the bits of me that I'm embarrassed about, I hate so much that I hide from myself, never mind other people. I think the labyrinth and my exploration of it has actually shown me that those bits of me are fine. They're just that they're as important as the bits that I'm proud of and like to show to the world. A bit like I can't remember who's saying, but you can't have a hill without one side in the sun and one in the shade. It's neither good nor bad. It just is.
Like the shadow side, like the young kind of approach.
Yeah, I think so. It's just that sort of, I think that's where Jungian sort of psychology comes into it, for me anyway.